Hey guys, I'm here today with Kishore Kapoor, and he's the lead attorney over at the law office of Kishore Kapoor, specializes in real estate law. And I know he has a very extensive legal background, but I really brought him on today to talk to everyone about some of the main mistakes that we're seeing buyers make when it comes to real estate, and also why it's so important to have a real estate attorney when you're buying, selling, or financing a home. So, Kishore, appreciate your time, and thanks for joining me today.
I'm glad to be here today too.
Thank you. So, really, what we're going to start with is just talking about these top three mistakes that we see buyers making. And I want Kishore to kind of go in from a legal standpoint of what these are and some of the details on them to help all of our listeners and all of our watchers here from all over. So, really, the first mistake that we honed in on is, a lot of buyers, they don't understand the contract dates and the emphasis of what those contract dates mean. So, Kishore, can you go ahead and just talk to everyone about why that's such a big mistake and really what they need to pay attention to on the contract dates?
Sure. So there's three major dates that we talk about when we talk about a real estate contract, right? We have the first one that everybody knows of is the home inspection. And during the home inspection, it's really the buyer's chance to do their due diligence and go through the property with a home inspector to look at the issues of the house, right? Does an outlet not work that they need to have replaced? Does the roof leak, right? The major things, you're looking at the components of the house to make sure that the house is in fairly good shape, right? You not really going through it with a super fine tooth comb, but you're going through it, pointing out major things. Most home inspectors, it's 50 or 60 page report, and you pick, 8 to 10 things that you really can't live with if they were like that, right? So if big one we see are outlets and leaking windows, right? Or unpainted windows. So it's just our chance to work out, maybe negotiate a better purchase price or a credit, or just to tell the seller we need these items fixed. Keep in mind, and this is where our mortgage people will tell us there's certain things that FHA loans are going to require. I'm not an expert in what those elements are. That's something Rob could tell us at some point too, or you may want to ask Rob. But that would be, a whole nother set of things that will come up that we need to make sure get fixed. Another date that's important is the mortgage contingency date. The mortgage contingency date is the date which a buyer needs a mortgage by. If the mortgage, let's say the mortgage contingency date is tomorrow and we don't have a mortgage by tomorrow at 5 p.m., what happens? So you have a couple of different options. You have the option of saying, all right, hands up, I'm done, I quit, I'm walking away, give me my deposit back. You've got no obligation to me, I've got no obligation to you. I'd say that rarely happens, right? What typically, more likely than not, that happens is we say, can we get an extension? We need an extra week, right? Ask for an extra week. If we get it in that week, great. If not, we ask for another week, right? We keep asking for time until we get a denial letter from your mortgage company saying you don't qualify for a mortgage, or we say you do qualify and we're moving forward. Unfortunately, I gotta say, probably 50 different contracts that float around the state of Connecticut. Some contracts give the seller the right to cancel if you don't have a approved mortgage by a certain date, which being your mortgage contingency date. Most sellers don't, though. Realistically, they want to get their house sold. That's why they listed it. That's why they went under contract with you. I will say the inspection date and the mortgage contingency date are a little bit more firm dates, because if you don't do what you're supposed to do, something else happens, right? But courts have decided if you don't meet that date, it's a reasonable time after that. So, it's a little flexible. People tend to hold these dates harder than the closing date. So the closing date is typically, in the industry, we consider a target date, not necessarily the firm closing date, because there are a number of factors that need to occur before we can close, right? So one is the buyer's mortgage company needs to give us some approval, right? So you're going through a application process with the mortgage lender. You're giving them bunch of your financial documents to say you have enough money to pay for the mortgage or you don't. They'll make that decision, right? So we need them, being the mortgage company, to give you an approval to close. Then we need to flip over and go talk to the seller's attorney and say, do you guys have your stuff ready to go? Right? There's a possibility the seller's attorney doesn't have something. We need to request a mortgage payoff from the seller's current mortgage company. Some take longer, some are quick. So it really depends on that. We're relying on a number of different outside sources for our figures. Then there's a possibility that you as the buyer aren't ready, right? You know, people get sick, we have vacations planned, things that come up that people didn't think about. So there's been times where we have to delay closings because of a buyer. The biggest headache we end up seeing is people get upset because, well, I hired my movers already, right? I took a day off from work. My father is coming in especially to be here for the closing. Whatever the reason is, they've hired or taken steps to plan around that closing date, thinking it would be a definite closing date. One of the biggest things that you can use as a kind of a indicator that we're going to be closing on that date is the mortgage company has to send you what is called a closing disclosure, right? They send you out a rough estimate of what you're going to be coming to closing with. Typically, this is the highest number that you can come to closing with some exceptions. But in terms of the mortgage figures, it's pretty set. What you need is you need adjustments from the attorney, which is where we come in. And depending on the mortgage company, sometimes they have those figures before we send out the closing disclosure, and sometimes we don't. But typically, you'll know 3 days before you have the right to close that you can close, which kind of sucks because, you know, I don't know many movers that will say, oh yeah, we can move within 3 days. So it's kind of a tough sell there. But, you know, having the mortgage company being aware of the fact that, having your moving company be aware of the fact that you are going to be moving sometimes helps. They have a little bit of flexibility, but it's kind of tough. So those are the dates that I say you'd really need to be concerned with. The one thing I'll say with the closing date is, unless it says time is being of the essence or time is the essence or something to that effect, that the timing of this is important, we will be flexible with our date. If it says time of the essence, which is typically if you're buying a house from a bank or a mortgage company or the federal government or the state government, you don't typically see that language in there, because that language hurts both the buyers and the sellers, right? And why I say it can hurt the sellers if the sellers have a delay, well, we don't care. They have to close, right? That's a firm date. That's the only time you see a firm date. I will never recommend it to anybody to put time of the essence in there unless you're a mortgage company or somebody that has to get rid of the property at a certain time, because it hurts both the buyer and the seller if we can't close on time.
Okay. I think that's a good kind of first point to start with. So before we move on, let me make a couple notes here from the financing and the mortgage standpoint on what you talked about. The first thing is, as far as the inspection, you know, when I started doing this almost 2 decades ago, when a purchase contract would come in, you know, I get really excited about helping my buyer purchase their home and jump the gun on ordering appraisals and moving forward full speed ahead. But what you find out is that, you know, there is a chunk of transactions that have inspection issues that cannot be overcome. Okay, it's not a large percentage, but it's definitely a notable percentage. And with that said, as Kishore mentioned, you don't want to have an appraisal done on a house for an FHA loan if there's going to be issues that need to be resolved ahead of time. The 2 most common issues that I find, and this is specific to FHA loans, which I would say are right now probably the most common first-time buyer loans, because they have very flexible credit requirements and very low down payment requirements. But FHA loans have some special property guidelines that have to be followed. So the 2 that I see that have the biggest issues are, number 1 is going to be chipping paint. If you have a house that was built, I believe, before 1979, and it has chipping paint because of asbestos and some other health issues, FHA will not lend on that property until that's rectified. chipping paint, I've seen it on the side of a garage where it's like a very small area, and it can be taken care of in an afternoon in like 30 minutes of painting. It's not really a big deal, but you want to know about that ahead of time. And that's something that you'll note on the inspection that they'll be able to take pictures of. The other big one that I see with FHA appraisal is going to be having rails. If there's more than 2 steps to any entrance in the house or anywhere inside the house, if there's more than 2 steps, there needs to be a handrail. So I've seen a lot of times where, you know, an appraiser will go out and there's not a handrail and there's 3 or 4 steps and they need to add that. Again, not a big deal, probably $100, if that, repair that needs to be done, depending on the circumstance. But it's great to know that ahead of time, because if your mortgage company, you know, jumps the gun and orders that appraisal before the inspection, then the appraiser might have to go out again. And you don't want that as a buyer, because these appraisers are busy and they pretty much always will charge a fee of $150 to $200 to go out a second time to do their final inspection. So the best practice that I use with all my buyers is, let's wait for the inspection to come in. Let's wait at least to know that there's no major issues that need to be taken care of before we proceed with the rest of the loan processing, the ordering of the appraisal, etc. Okay, so that's a best practice with that inspection date that he was talking about. So that's what I look at, is when's the inspection? You know, if you're a buyer, get that inspection done as soon as possible. I mean, if you can get the inspection done a day or 2 after you go under contract, that would be ideal, because I know on my end as a seasoned lender, we're not really moving full speed ahead with the entire mortgage application processing and underwriting until we know that that inspection is at least being negotiated, or there's no major issues that have come up that would stop the deal from closing and create any issues for the appraiser. The second thing is the mortgage contingency date. So we always try to meet that date. You know, in my eyes, that mortgage contingency is having the clear to close on the mortgage. I know different companies do it different ways. I've seen circumstances where they'll issue a mortgage, a commitment with conditions, and some of the conditions could be major. And, you know, that's not a good spot to be in as a buyer, because if something comes up on a bank statement, a pay stub, it could cause an issue with your mortgage closing. So again, best practice is to make sure you have the clear to close on your mortgage. That's what that mortgage contingency is all about. And that's what all my realtor partners and everyone involved really prefers. Because if the loan is clear to close, then short of you losing your job or a major catastrophe, you know that that mortgage is in play. I also have a best practice of letting my realtor partners, letting my attorneys know that, hey, we're a week out from mortgage contingency and we've got an issue. We don't have the appraisal back yet. We're waiting on a last bank statement. You know, I try to be proactive with that, because this is something where there's delays all the time with real estate, but the biggest pet peeve of all the professionals I know and work with is you don't want to be waiting till the 11th hour, you know, the day before mortgage contingency or the morning of, to say, hey, we don't have it yet. We got a problem with the appraisal. We got a problem with income or this or that. You want to give them, you know, a really nice heads up. I mean, as early as possible. I usually at least give them a week notice to say, hey, just a heads up, I don't think we're going to meet that date. Then the attorney, the title company, the realtors, the seller's attorneys can all kind of collaborate and say, hey, we need to extend this out. And then that goes in conjunction with the closing date. Normally, mortgage contingency date's probably going to be a couple days, maybe a week to 10 days before that closing date. If they do it before that, it would definitely not be customary, because normally you're going to get that clear to close, that mortgage commitment, and then within a day or 2, you're going to get that closing disclosure that Kishore was talking about. So we don't need 2-3 weeks after mortgage commitment to close. A week, like I said, week to 10 days is pretty customary on that. And, you know, the earlier the better. There's a lot of cases where we'll be clear to close and have our mortgage commitment maybe a week or 2 early, sometimes even 3 weeks early. It's a great position to be in as a buyer, as a lender. Just everyone's so much less stressed when we can say, hey, I know we're not scheduled to have our closing until September 15th, but we have our mortgage commitment and we could close as early as September 1st, just giving you guys a heads up so you can talk to everyone. And in a case where it's a vacant property or a motivated seller that's just ready to go, the sooner they can get out of there and move on to the next chapter, usually they're going to be motivated. On the other hand, if they live in the house, maybe they don't have somewhere to go yet, or maybe they're waiting to buy another house. They're waiting for their mortgage commitment on another property, or they have a closing scheduled that's in conjunction with this one. Those are the cases where we'll sit there and twiddle our thumbs for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and we'll wait till they're ready. But again, it's a powerful position to be in as a buyer and just as a party to a transaction when the mortgage contingency and the closing date can be moved up. It just is a lot less stressful and a lot easier. So I think that really hits home these points that Kishore was talking about on the different dates, from the different perspectives of a title office, an attorney, as well as myself as a lender. The second mistake that I really want to elaborate on here is, Kishore, is going to be, buyers that get ahead of themselves. You made a note in your last comment there about hiring movers, buying furniture, things of that nature. So can you talk to our listeners and viewers out there about, why it's such a big mistake as a buyer to get too far ahead of yourself, how that can be a negative in the process and how it can come back to bite you?
Yep. So I'm going to go back a point and just say those are great points about the inspection. Also on the attorney side, nothing is really done before the inspection is occurring. While you can talk to us and hire us beforehand, we just kind of sit and wait, because I would say 90% of deals that do die at the inspection period, not much farther after that, right? Unless something crazy happens, COVID aside, we saw a lot of buyers that things fell apart because of COVID initially, jobs losses and things like that. But that was out of the ordinary. Most of the time, we get past inspection, we're closing. So that's great. And it's always, Rob, I like that idea. The sooner you get a clear to close, it's good for our clients. It relieves a lot of stress on everybody, which is what myself, Rob, the realtor, all your team is trying to do. Where our job is to make your life a little less stressful than it needs to be with this transaction. So that being said, kind of goes into the next point of, getting ahead of yourself just adds a whole lot of stress, right? We recently had a client that set up a cleaning person to come the day of closing. The cable company was coming, the garbage company was coming, and her mover was coming. We didn't close, right? We got pushed back by a day. There was something with, actually the lender didn't get the closing disclosure out in time. We couldn't close because day 3 was our closing date. So now we had to push it back, right? You don't want to get ahead of yourself, because now you have a huge headache on your hand. You got to cancel your mover. You got to reschedule everything. And I don't know about anybody, but last time I've tried to call a cable company, sat on hold for about an hour beforehand, right? So that's kind of making it a little bit of a challenge. Don't recommend it. The other thing I don't recommend doing is going and buying your furniture for 2 reasons. So I'll give you a personal story, but I'll tell you the bigger reason. Most people buy furniture on credit, right? Well, a lot of what your mortgage is based off is what is your debt to income ratio, right? How much debt do you carry versus how much money you make. Well, when you add a new credit card, that lowers the amount of income that you can use on your mortgage, right? Because you got to pay that credit card now, or that loan to Raymore and Flanagan, for example, or the furniture store, right? And that's not an endorsement for Raymore and Flanagan. It's just furniture store that popped into my head. But the furniture store, now you have a debt to them. Even if it's a $50 a month debt, that may screw up your ability to get a mortgage, right? So there's that aspect of it. But the more practical side of it is, and I made this mistake, so I'm guilty of it. I bought my bedroom set before moving into our house. My bedroom set ended up being way too big for my bedroom. So now my bedroom set takes up our whole bedroom and it looks stupid, right? We made it work, but half the furniture had to go back because they couldn't fit it all, right? So there's that practical side of getting ahead of yourself. Outside of any issues and messing anything up with our closing, that's really the big practical issue. We've had clients that have opened credit cards at went to a department store and they offered them a credit card and they're like, ooh, you could save 30% today. Yeah, just be careful. I know it's not done intentionally, but it's something to keep in your mind, right? You're buying a house. You should not be trying to spend extra money at this point. As much as it sucks, wait a couple of days. You're going to close and we'll be done. Another good story, we actually had a client that went and bought a car in the closing process, which put him in a very tough spot because he had left with two options: keep your beautiful new car that you love, or get your house. What do you want to do? So he actually ended up having to give his car back, close on his house, and I'm pretty sure he went and bought the car a week later, but you can do that. So don't get ahead of yourself. Don't open new credit cards. Don't do anything that's going to change your financial situation in those weeks coming up to closing.
Absolutely. I have stories like that too, and I'll touch on one, but let me tell everyone why and how this kind of comes about, because you may think, okay, I'm approved for my mortgage, I'm good. But understand that the way that the lending process works is that there's something called an LQI report, or a quality control credit report, that is obtained by the underwriter, usually a week, couple weeks before you're closing. And what that quality control report does is it simply takes the date that you had your credit initially run for that mortgage and the current date, and it looks at that gap. You know, there could be a gap of 3 weeks, there could be a gap of 2 or 3 months from when you initially got your mortgage applied for and the present date. And that quality control credit report shows the underwriter, are there any new debts? But more importantly, are there any new inquiries? So even if you went to the furniture store and said, hey, you know, I want to apply to see about getting furniture, I'm not ready to get it yet, I haven't closed. Even if you just apply for it, it's going to be seen. So I guess the moral is, don't think that they're not looking. We're going to catch it every single time. I've seen it. You wait till the day after the closing to be safe. That's just the best practice. You know, the day after the closing, you got to the keys to your house. You can go buy a car, go buy furniture, do what you need to do. Just don't do it before that, because it could and it does cause problems. The story I have is a client of mine I had done several mortgages for over the years to refinance. They had multiple properties. They bought their dream beach home down in Old Saybrook, Connecticut on the shoreline. And they were so excited. You know, they had sold 2 houses to buy this one house. It was their dream retirement home. And they got so excited, they went down to Pilgrim Furniture and they spent somewhere thereabouts $15,000 on furniture. Of course, they didn't take delivery yet, but they went and bought it. They picked everything out. They bought it. They moved forward. It got caught at that quality control credit report. Unfortunately, they did not qualify for the mortgage anymore. So they had to go cancel the entire order, close the credit line. Otherwise, they weren't going to be able to buy their home. At the end of the day, they just went back and reopened it after everything was completed on their closing. But it was a situation that wasn't good. You know, it was a lot of things that had to be done to undo all that, a lot of added stress for everyone involved in the entire process. So huge lesson there that you want to keep in mind is not to do any of that until after the closing, okay? And just another best practice of not getting ahead of yourself, don't make any large deposits other than payroll deposits into your bank account. You know, don't go deposit thousands of dollars in cash. Don't get a check written by your friend that owed you, $3,000. These are all things that are going to be scrutinized by underwriting. Just keep your changes to a minimum or nothing between when you apply for the loan and when you close. That's the best practice. And if you have an emergency scenario, or if you have a check you need to deposit that's not a payroll check, that's a larger sum of money, or any deposit going into your bank account that it's going to be seen by underwriting, talk to your loan officer about that ahead of time. Don't wait until it comes up. Mention it. Let's discuss it. Most of the time, we can come up with solutions to help, or explanations that we can put in the file so that these things don't become an issue. So hopefully that really shows everyone why you don't want to get ahead of yourself and just keep everything on an even keel until after the closing. Once you have those keys in your hands, you can go do whatever you want. But until then, you are going to be scrutinized. Everything's going to be looked at, and you don't want to be in a position, like Kishore said, where you have to choose between, do I want a house or do I want a car? Okay? So hope that gives everyone some really good insight on that. The third and final mistake that I want to hone in on, and I know, Kishore, you have a lot of experience in this, is an owner's title policy. So there's two different types of title policies we normally see, a lender's policy and an owner's policy. And a lender's policy, there's really no way around. If you're getting a mortgage, you have to get that. No ifs, ands, or buts. But buying an owner's title policy, from my experience, can be a lot less expensive. And people may see, oh, $350, what do I need this for? That seems like a waste. And with a lot of first time and repeat buyers being tight on money to close, people think, oh, well, let me cut a corner. Why do I need this? Like, let me just get this thing removed. I'll save a couple $100 or whatnot, and that'll give me more money to spend on furniture, moving expenses, etc. But that couldn't be further from the truth. An owner's title policy is one of, if not the most important parts of this transaction to protect you as a homeowner, future homeowner, and current home buyer. So if you can just kind of elaborate on that, maybe give a couple case studies about how that can benefit our buyers and our listeners.
I'm going to do a jump back for a second again. Some mortgage companies have a 24-hour quality control review where they review after you close for 24 hours. So I recommend actually people waiting 48 hours to go buy the furniture or there's something new, because in theory, and I say in theory because I haven't had this happen to anybody, but the mortgage company could, what they call the mortgage, because you've done something to change your credit worthiness, right? I think it's very unwise for a mortgage company to do so, but what they could say is pay us off immediately or we're taking the house back, right? And then they'll foreclose on you and it affects your credit and it's just not worth the headache. So I say a good rule of thumb is to wait 48 hours to do anything. But if you have a lender that doesn't check it, then you could do it too.
Just communicate, ask your lender. I've had multiple clients say to me, hey, I need to buy a new car. When can I do that? Right. And we can figure those timelines out. Every lender is different. My company, like I said, can be a week to 2 weeks from closing that they'll do it. There are some mortgage companies, as Kishore said, that, could be 24 hours after closing. So best practice is talk to your loan officer, talk to your lender, get their company's protocol on that and their policy. If you want to be safe, wait the 48 hours.
So to go forward now on kind of title insurance, just so everyone has a basic understanding. So the first thing we do is a title search, right? A title search is we go through the public land records and we check to see that the current owner owns the property, which you'd be surprised how many contracts come up without the current owner being the person that owns the property, right? Family member, something to that effect. Somebody else signed the contract for that point, but checking that the owner owns it and that there's no liens or restrictions to the property, right? And a lien is just somebody that has a claim to the property. That they're owed money, they were the lender that gave them the money, or that they're somebody that sued the owner. Lender's title insurance, looking out for lender only, and what they're looking out is to make sure that nobody else can come in and say they own the property or have a right to the property higher than you and the mortgage company, right? So it's the owner, then the mortgage company. So your owner's policy is going to cover you against everybody that comes out claiming their own owning the property. So good story is Abe Lincoln. His father bought a piece of property, 300 acres in Kentucky, paid $200 for it. Somebody came in and claimed they owned the property from underneath him. Wasn't recorded in time. He didn't have the right paperwork, whatever the case was. They ended up going to court and losing the house. Ironically, he did the same thing again 4 years later. He bought a house, didn't get the correct paperwork, and then again, they lost it because somebody else said that they owned it. So what title insurance does is it protects you from somebody saying that they own your house and not the person that sold it to you, or that they have a lien on the property that you now are responsible for, right? Typically what ends up happening is when we buy a house, we're paying off somebody else's mortgage. The mortgage company has to record what's called a release. The release notifies everyone that the seller of the house is released from all liability for this property, for this debt. That's the biggest problem we see is that release doesn't get recorded. While we know the mortgage is paid off, it still looks like there's something there, right? To hire me to go back and now chase down that release, I charge $250 to $300 an hour. Typically, your title insurance policy is going to cost you $250, $300 one time, right, for life. If you don't have title insurance and you have this issue, Now we have to hold all your money from the closing, right, until we can get that resolved. Plus, you got to pay myself or whoever you're going to be hiring to do that. So not only is it going to cost you the $250 or $300 an hour to get it fixed, it's also going to cost you maybe missing out on your next home, right? Because
And
if
I
you,
can say this is common. Like I see all the time missing discharges.
right,
Whether it's a client who's refinancing and an old loan will come back from, 15 years ago that they paid off and they can't find paperwork, and it's a big issue. I mean, it
right,
has to be resolved, and it takes time. I mean, usually we can get this stuff resolved, but it takes time to
yeah,
get it resolved. It can delay closings. So it's just, again, best practices here. We're just giving you, as industry professionals doing this a long time, these are things that you won't know as a first-time buyer. You may not even know if you bought a house before because nobody's coached you through it. It's worth that couple $100 for the owner's title insurance policy because it insures you and the house that you're buying from these issues, and they come up a lot more often than you may think. Okay, so just do it,
yep.
pay it, suck it up. You're already paying thousands of dollars in closing costs. What's another couple $100 to protect the investment that you're making? And it might end up being one of the best, if not the best investment you're making in your new property.
And the other aspect of this is the way I tell clients is think about this. If you have to hire an attorney, how much are you going to pay to fix an issue, right? I would say on average, it takes me 5 to 6 hours because I've got to sit on hold with the bank trying to get to the correct person, right? So conservatively, that's $1,500, right? If I did the math right, somewhere in that range, $1,200 to $1,500 just to get a document released. They typically take about a month. I've got one that I just requested from the city of New Haven that they told me it's going to be 3 weeks from the date that I send them a check for $50 to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So, that's you delaying your money for 3 weeks.
And it really comes full circle because we were talking about dates, contract dates earlier here.
Yep.
This is probably, in my experience, one of, if not the number one reason why a closing can get delayed on a refinance or a purchase is a missing discharge. And I just had a family member of mine that was selling their house, and they couldn't, they were scheduled to close like last Monday, and nobody could find this discharge from a mortgage from like 2009, and it delayed the closing, several days. Everyone's there on pins and needles wondering, like, where is it? How are we going to get it? What's going to happen? They had to go suck it up, pay the attorney. They did end up getting it, but the last thing you want is for this to happen at the 11th hour, and it'll delay the contract dates. There's extra paperwork. Maybe your rate lock on your mortgage is going to expire. Like, there's all these layers of stress that are added. And by just having this owner's title policy, sucking up the couple $100, you can avoid, a lot of this heartache, a lot of these delays, a lot of this stress. So hopefully now everyone realizes why it's such a good investment to get an owner's title policy. Don't fight it. I mean, it's your house, it's your option, but it may end up just being a great return on investment.
And the last point that I'm going to make on this is just realize title insurance is protecting against the human error aspect of this too, right? Because there's a person drafting the document involved in it, right? You've got the town clerk, you've got the title searcher, and you got the attorney. You have 4 people that are going to be reviewing these documents. What if the first person misspelled somebody's name and there's now a valid lien on your property that you didn't know about? Or forget the first person. Let's say the first person did it right and the second person messed up, the town clerk. We've had that happen. We had somebody misspelled the name that was recorded. We couldn't find the lien. It came back to bite my client afterwards. Luckily, she had title insurance and we fixed it, right? It's also protecting against the title searcher and myself, right? If one of us messes up and misreads something and there's something got missed, you're protected. So it's another level of insurance that you're not going to have some way of getting screwed.
I think an important point on that regard is not to take it off in a different direction, but really the title industry, the title insurance industry, just the whole back end legal part of the real estate industry, in my humble opinion, is one of the most outdated industries in the entire country. There's very little innovation. Every town and city has their own, protocol, their own way of doing recording, their own website and documentation and all this. And it's like, it's very fragmented. So you've got some areas that they can get a title search back in 24, 48 hours. And then you've got the next town over. It could take a week or two for the same thing. It's my opinion and really my hope that over the next 12, 24 months, as a result of innovation going on because of COVID and everything, we're seeing a lot of innovation in the real estate industry. Realtors have it, mortgage lenders have it. Like, everyone is zooming years ahead because we have to. There's no choice. The title industry and the legal part of the real estate industry has not really gotten that memo yet, because again, there's so many different parts of the process. I know, Kishore, your office, from my opinion, and dealing with a lot of attorneys all over, is definitely at the forefront, because you guys have like a document portal and a status portal, and that's very rare, you know, to see that in your industry. So kudos to you guys for really doing that, because that's very rare. If not, I mean, it's the first one I've seen in doing hundreds of transactions a year. So I think that that's great. It doesn't stop the fact that, in my opinion, title searches should be back in 24 hours. I mean, there's just no reason, you know, and I've got refinances that I'm waiting on for like 2 weeks to get title searches back because the town is just, you know, outdated, or, you know, the record keeping and everything just takes so long. So I think that once the title industry catches up as a whole nationwide to create a scenario where we can have this electronic record keeping, and you can go on as a title or a real estate attorney and type in an address and get a title search back within 24 hours. It's my opinion that once that's done, you will see mortgage turn times, underwriting turn times, and the process of getting a home be whittled down at least 1 week quicker than it is right now. I know in a lot of cases in refinancing, the only thing that we wait on is a title search. Like, we get an appraisal waiver, we get all our documents and verifications instantaneously through the internet. The only thing we wait on is the title search. You know, mortgage payoffs can come back in hours now using an automated system or online. The one piece of the puzzle that is not a 24, 48-hour turn time is that title search. So I know in my mortgage practice, once we can get that title innovation done, whenever it is, mortgage closings are going to be able to happen in light speed. I mean, 7 to 10 day mortgage closings will be possible, especially in cases where we have appraisal waivers and things of that nature. So just a little side note, you know, along the lines of what you were talking about, because I think that if you're watching this and it's, you know, a couple of years down the line, you may already be in a position where this technology is in place. It's just not right now as we record this in August of 2020. Do you have any comments on that?
Well, what I find fascinating is my searches slowed down when COVID started and all the towns went on websites. Like, all the towns, for the most part, I'd say 95% of towns in Connecticut went online during COVID, you know, from March to now, right? And my title searches slowed down, actually, which I thought was interesting. So I just don't know that if the towns just weren't equipped to handle that load on their websites or what. But the hard part is, I don't foresee us getting away from ink signatures on deeds and documents, which is going to cause there always to be this delay in the searches, because what ends up happening is the searcher has to go through some sort of system to look at what's been recorded that day, that week, whatever that time frame is. But no, we try to be on top of technology. You know, we've embraced Zoom, we've embraced, you know, whatever technology can make our life easier, we've embraced it. Like you said, we have our own document portal, status portal. You know, it does a lot for us, making our life easier, which hopefully in turn makes everybody's life easier in the transaction.
Absolutely. So I kind of wanted to end out here, guys, with just talking to Kishore about, you know, why you as a buyer need a real estate attorney. A lot of people don't get it. They either think they don't need one, it's an expense they don't want to take on, or they don't understand. Maybe they've been told by their realtor, their lender, you need a real estate attorney. They don't get why. Can you just talk about why it's so important to have a real estate attorney representing you when you're buying, selling, or refinancing your home?
So there's a couple of reasons. One is it's the law, right? So it's very basic. As of October of this last year, the legislators in Hartford decided it's important enough that you need an attorney during the process. So in Connecticut, you cannot buy, sell, or refinance a house without an attorney. You can do a home equity line without an attorney, but and there are some other exceptions too, but traditionally, typically you can't buy, sell, or refinance a house without an attorney licensed to do a real estate closing. Doesn't mean you should use any attorney, just like a doctor's license to practice, a generalist can practice everywhere. Don't recommend it if you have a specialized issue. And I think real estate is something that's you should have an attorney that's focused on real estate, right? Because it's a very complex area of law. Even though it doesn't seem it, there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes. If there's an issue, we need to know how to handle it. And real estate issues come up that you need to know a little bit of knowledge of a bunch of different things. Timelines, like we talked about, are important and are kind of, some of them are hard and some of them are not. But really, my job is to protect you, right? To protect you from somebody that's out there that may have put a lien on the property that you didn't know about, to explain things to you, right? So technically, explaining the contract is me giving you legal advice, right? So the contract that you signed, somebody needs to explain that to you. That's typically the attorney's job, is to explain what the meaning of is in the documents, right? I will sit there and explain the mortgage documents to you, make sure that you are getting and understanding what you're getting, right? What you're signing, right? Because I don't know about most people, but I don't want to sign my life away without knowing what I'm signing. So my job is to have read that document, and typically mortgage documents are about 100 pages. And I don't know about anybody else, but it takes me a long time to read 20 pages at a time, right? It takes me about a half hour to get through 20 pages. So if you got to read 100 pages, that's what, 2.5 hours? It takes us an hour to explain it to you because I already read it that many times. So it's just, a lot of it's just to keep the process smooth, quicker, and make it easier for you. But it's also, the most important part is we're protecting your biggest asset of your life, your house, right? Because we're making sure that you don't have somebody coming out of the woodwork to claim you own the property, right? Or you don't have getting half the property transferred to you and you lost half because somebody didn't read something, right? We've had that happen where somebody owned 3 parcels of land and only transferred 2, thinking they only transferred 3, and it became a problem. So it's all those little things. When to hire an attorney is a question that we typically get asked. And I tell people, as soon as you start looking, it's not a bad idea to talk to an attorney, right? Because I can tell you what the taxes are on that house when you're going to put your bid in. I can tell you if there's something we need to look about. I can run a quick title search telling you that. On the selling side, I can tell you if there's liens on your property, right? So I can be involved as soon as you want me to. I could explain the contract to you before you sign it, right? Those are things we can do.
Yeah, and usually I find buyers, they're not going to get an attorney involved until their lender is like, oh, hey, by the way, who are you using as we're doing the mortgage process? And then like, wait, what? I need an attorney? Okay, who do you recommend? So I think the point I want to end out with is, I've talked in some of my other videos and lessons about having a wealth team, having a team of people that you trust, you have a relationship with, on the real estate side, the mortgage side, the financial planning side, the legal side as far as attorneys, title insurance, everything we're talking about here. You need this wealth team, because if every time you go to buy a house or refinance or do something with your finances, you end up using a different attorney, different mortgage company, different realtor, well, then you're missing the boat on this, okay? Every single successful real estate investor, multimillionaire entrepreneur that I've worked with in my years, they all have this team set up. They have a trusted attorney they've worked with before. They have a lender that they have that relationship. They've done multiple loans with. They have a realtor that they know, like, and trust, that has the experience. You don't need to rebuild this team every time. You get it once, you solidify it, and it just makes it so much easier. And then all these different people are all working in concert together as a team on your behalf. So I want to hit that point home with everyone, is if you're ready to buy a house now, start building that wealth team. Get in touch with an attorney, find your lender, find your advisor for your real estate that's going to find properties for you. Talk to several if you need to. Do that before you're under the pressure of a timeline, before you're under pressure of contract. Don't go under contract and then be like, oh, I don't trust my realtor. I don't trust my lender. That's the wrong time. You want to be doing this weeks or months ahead. There's never a time too early. So again, you want to have that real estate advisor, the mortgage advisor, and the legal advisor. Okay. And that is really what's going to be the foundation of the wealth team. To build it out further, you'd have a tax advisor or CPA, and you'd have a financial planner or financial advisor that's going to help with your investments, your retirement planning, that sort of thing. So it ends up being like 3 to 5 people really that you have. So go out there, get your wealth team started. And I would like to really defer now to Kishore, because if you're watching and listening, you may want to reach out to him for help with your real estate transaction in the state of Connecticut. So Kishore, can you tell everyone what areas you mainly work in and how they can reach out to you if they need your help?
So my firm covers the entire state of Connecticut. We go wherever. The one thing I mentioned with Rob's idea of the wealth team, it's a phenomenal idea. I think it's the best idea that I've heard, and I'm going to be stealing that and sharing it with everybody I know. But the aspect of this too is when you're familiar with your team, I have clients that are repeat clients. I'll go to their house and do things, right? We, as professionals, we may treat you a little bit differently than our typical client. We might go above him and a little bit extra, right? I have a client, we come in, we do a 15-minute closing because he knows he trusts me. He says, just tell me where to sign. It's not the best practice, but he's built to such a level of trust with his team that he doesn't need to know the nitty-gritty because he knows he's protected. Right? He knows his mortgage person is getting him the best rate. He knows his realtor is always looking out for his best interest. He knows me as the attorney is always going to say, wait, we need to look at this one document because it's new. Right? But he knows that I've looked at all the documents, and he's confident that we could just say, all right, I need to get in and out in 15 minutes because this is the time I have. Let's go, and we'll run. Right? So that's kind of the important part, having that team, because now you have a level of trust that you will not have otherwise. So how to get in contact with me, you can reach out to us. The office number is 203-693-8055. We have a website. It's it's K Kapoor Law, which is KKAPOORLAW.com. Or you could email me at Kishore, KISHORE, at kkapoorlaw.com. And I'll spell the whole thing again, which is KISHORE, at KKAPOORLAW.com. And we're happy if you want to sit down and do a discussion prior to you even going under contract. We can recommend mortgage professionals. I'm going to recommend Rob as the mortgage person because he's a great resource, not just because he invited me today, but he's also a great resource. We've worked together on a couple of deals, and he's a true professional and makes life easier for you. But I'm more than happy to sit down with people, go through kind of what you should be thinking about prior to even looking, if you'd like. Or prior to even listing. Wherever you want to involve us involved, we will. We are a flat fee, so when you do sell your house or buy your house, it's included in the pre-consultation. So keep that in mind.
Excellent. So yeah, guys, if you need the expertise of a real estate pro when it comes to title and real estate law, reach out to Kishore in his office. As always, you know how to reach me for any mortgage advice or anything you need on the financing end. We really hope this helps, and we'll talk to everyone soon. Take care.
Thank you.